And that? All right, good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I hope you had a good first hour here. We're starting momentarily. Here are still seats available for those standing in the back. Everywhere we still have chairs available. So this is a 90-minute program. Feel free to take a seat. And with that, allow me to start this part of our Wildfire Ready Monterey program. So again, welcome to everyone. Welcome to the city of Monterey. Welcome to the conference center in Monterey. For those of you who don't know, my name is Hans Uslar. I'm the city manager for our beautiful city. And I wanted to start us off with a story that I wanted to tell you. And it goes like that. In my previous life, I served in the Navy. And at that time, when I was in the Navy, there was a need to identify officer candidates or very young junior officers to recruit them for our naval air wings. And so there was a shortage of aviators, and they needed people to fly the fighter jets. And so I applied and almost immediately got invited to a 2-day assessment center in beautiful Munich, Bavaria. And I did 2 days of intense testing. And at the end of 2 days of test, of practical tests, a psychological test, physical fitness test, the main evaluator walked up to me and she asked me very, very gently if it would break my heart to let me know that I tested so badly I should not even get close to any military airplanes, let alone fighter jets. So what she meant by that was the following. There are so many other candidates were ahead of me that had so much more talent demonstrated during the testing that I was just not worth the investment into training. So my heart was not broken, and I was very happy to learn that there's a baseline. And that's the story that I wanted to confer to you. We have a baseline. And when we talk about wildfires, we already have here in Monterey a baseline in place. We have a baseline. We are not starting from ground zero. And what we try to show you in front of the ballroom here and also in the next 90 minutes here, we want to show you where we have set the baseline so far and what we have to do better together with you to set new goals, set the bar higher, and also push the baseline up. In our teams, we have a lot of trained and talented professionals that understand the challenges of wildfire. And we will share that with you today. And our experts that we also invited from other agencies will share also what they know and how they can prepare. And with the professionalism that our teams already have in place, we started planning for this event during the fires in LA, while we still had 2 crews down fighting fires on behalf of the residents of LA. Our teams were down there, and the 2 engines that you see parked outside were actually engines that were down there in the Palisades fire. Wildfires are a great concern for us, and we know that preparation and collaboration is critical to safeguard our community. But it takes all of us. Residents want to know that their city, their fire department, and the first responders are wildfire ready. And residents also want to know what they can do. What can you do to be prepared? So today's town hall meeting will cover the roles of residents and business owners and how you can prepare. And we will also discuss how can you create defensible spaces. And we hope also to share with you a lot of the insights, how far we are already prepared for that event. So, thank you so much for attending today. It's my hope that we all leave tonight a little bit more educated about what we've been doing, and also a little bit more educated about what we can all do together to be better prepared for fire emergencies. Now, a lot of thanks. Thank you to all our team members who prepared this town hall meeting. And I hope that in response to the LA wildfires, that we took the time to really put together a complete information package for you, and also show you through the vendor fair a few things that you can already do for your own homes. And with that, I will have to thank more than 20 organizations that are in the other part of our ballroom and have staffed tables and have engaged with many of you. So with that in mind, I will hand off the facilitation of our panel of experts to our Assistant City Manager, Ned Roshanasathira. Ned has been with the city since 2019, and as part of his assigned responsibilities has been emergency management. He was the guy that was ordered to sit in the EOC for weeks and months while we had COVID, and he did a lot of natural disasters as well in his experience. So with that, Ned will the facilitation, and with that I express my hope that you don't screw up.
Great. Thank you so much, Hans. Appreciate it. I'll try not to screw up the facilitation of tonight's evening event. So, good evening, everyone. And again, thank you so much for joining us this evening here at the Monterey Conference Center for the Wildfire Ready Town Hall. So for any of those of you who may have missed it coming in, we do have Spanish translation available, provided by Reliable Translations. As part of Hans's story, he said it best, wildfire readiness and preparation takes a collaborative effort with all of us. As a homeowner here on the Monterey Peninsula, I live in a very high fire hazard severity zone myself. And I've personally experienced the anxiety of wildfires, having evacuated during the 2020 river fire. And I deeply understand the fears and concerns that many of you all have. I've also taken personal steps myself to create a defensible space around my home. And we're going to learn a lot tonight about that topic, as well as other topics that are all on each and every one of your minds. Thank you again to everyone who submitted questions, both online as well as here tonight. We're very fortunate tonight to have an excellent panel of experts to provide insight and answers to your questions on topics ranging from defensible space and tree regulations to evacuation planning and more. I'll introduce this great lineup one by one, but to make sure that we have adequate time for questions from the panel, I'll keep these intros brief. But you can find their full bios on our website at monterey.gov/wildfire-ready, along with other resources from tonight's program. We're going to start to my left here and introduce each of the panelists. First up, we have Monterey Police Chief Dave Hober. Next, we have from the California Department of Insurance, Richie Sayavong. From the County of Monterey's Emergency Management Department, Director Kelsey Scanlon. We have Monterey's very own Fire Chief, Andrew Miller. Monterey Fire Inspector, Jen Valdez. Got a lot of cheers there for Jen. That's great. Good to see. We also have from California American Water, Senior Director of Communications and External Affairs, Public Affairs Manager Evan Jacobs. And last but not least, we also have PG&E's Director of the Enhanced Power Line Safety Settings, EPSS, Program Management Office, Eric Lamoureux. Tonight we had planned to have our Assistant Urban Forester, Tice Norton, to join the panel, but due to illness, he's unable to join us. But we do have two parks staff who will be part of a breakout session about tree management that's going to be happening right after this general session today. Again, thanks so much for being here. This panel will last approximately 60 minutes, leaving a little bit of time for Q&A. After we've structured we've structured this discussion to address many of the key concerns we've had from our community members. Index cards were available at the lobby table when you arrived for any additional questions you may have, and these were to be turned in no later than 6 p.m., and we're going to be addressing those questions in the Q&A time period as time allows. So let's just go ahead and get started with the program. All right, first up we have a question for Fire Chief Andrew Miller. So we know that the Monterey Fire Department is wildfire ready. So Chief Miller, to help kick things off, can you help us walk through what wildfire ready means? What resources are available to the fire department when responding to a potential wildfire in the area?
Absolutely. Can everybody hear me okay? All right,
Yeah.
There we go. First and foremost, thank you, Nat. I appreciate the nice introduction. Secondly, I wanted to thank everybody who's here tonight. It means so much to me and gives me such great confidence as your fire chief that you're here because you care enough about this very important topic of wildfires. I know that everybody has been a little rattled since the Los Angeles fires, myself as well. I think it's impacted, this entire nation. And what the city of Monterey thought would be a great idea would be to kind of preempt and to talk to our residents, because I can't tell you how many phone calls and emails and concerns and questions and how much I've been interacting with the community. So City Manager Hans Uslar thought this would be a good idea to create this town hall meeting for all of you. And part of this is not just for all of you, but it's to understand that, we all are part of a team. So the city has their part, the fire department has their part, and all of you have your part. And obviously, by looking at you here tonight, I see that you are ready to step up and want to learn and collaborate with us and be part of the solution so we could reach some great outcomes. First slide, please, Nat. So I'm going to cover a couple just components of how the fire department is wildfire ready. I don't have all night. I'm limited in time. I could speak on this for hours, but I'm going to try to break this down and just do a quick overview of kind of some of the things we're doing. So first topic is going to be the wildfire risk mitigation plans that we have in place. A lot of you might already have heard about our community wildfire protection plan. That's a plan that a few years ago we hired a consultant with our partner cities, Pacific Grove and Carmel by the Sea. And think of that as being a core planning document to identify risk, prevent, mitigate, and respond to wildfires. And if you would like to see that plan up close, you will have copies at our table tonight. And you can also, there's a barcode, or you can scan to have a copy brought to your phone. The next part of the plan is the fuels mitigation program. This is something we started last year. So think of the Community Wildfire Protection Plan as our planning document, what needs to be done, identify where the areas that need the most work, and our fuels mitigation program as the action plan. This is going to be boots on the ground, actually doing work. So this is fuel reduction, defensible space inspections, and things like that. So it's going to track the work in progress. We're going to track the work that's been completed. We're going to track all of our defensible space inspections. We're going to do GIS mapping so we can do layering. Because if we just go out and do it and we don't track it, we're going to lose track or it's going to stall. And this is a living document, and this program is going to be continuing on from now till whenever. It's just going to be something we're going to be doing all the time. So the next thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is our defensible space inspection program. This is something that we're doing in the very high fire severity zones within Monterey, Pacific Grove, and Carmel by the Sea. And a lot of people have had a lot of concern about this. There's a lot of questions of what these inspections mean. And we're going to have a lot more discussion tonight. Jen Valdez, our fuels mitigation specialist, is here, and she'll also be talking in the breakout room specifically about defensible space inspections. I just want to do a quick overview. So where do we do these inspections? All the inspections are going to be done in the very high fire severity zones in Monterey, Pacific Grove, and Carmel. And I think Jen might have a slide with a map that kind of identifies where those areas are. We also have that map on our table outside. How are we going to do these inspections? We're going to use Jen, who's our fire inspector and our fuels management specialist. She's our program manager. We've hired 6 part-time DSI, defensible space inspection inspectors. We're going to be utilizing engine companies. So you will see these inspectors and these engine companies in the neighborhoods, and you will see them. And I encourage you, please reach out and talk to them, because we're there not as code enforcers, we're there as community partners. And then the last thing is when are we going to do this? Well, we started it in 2024. This is when we kind of built the program. We had to start the training, we had to develop the plan, figure out where we're going to go and how we're going to go about it. We're using all CAL FIRE kind of curriculum for our training and using all their specifications. And once again, like I said, it'll be in the very high fire severity zones. And then next year, then in 2025, May of this year, we're going to have, for the first time, send out defensible space inspection flyers. They're kind of like a trifold that look like this. And we're going to be sending them to all homes in the high fire severity zone. And it's kind of like a check-off list of what you can do to get your home prepared before the inspectors get there. So best case scenario is you receive your flyer in the mail and you use the checkoff list. Maybe you have a question, you give us a call, and you complete that. So by the time we get there to do the inspection, it's done, and then we can move on. We have hundreds of inspections to do. We need your help. Everybody kind of has to do their part, like I said before, to create that defensible space and do that home hardening. Next slide, thank you. So community collaboration. This is community collaboration. What I see before me tonight, I'm absolutely amazed that we've had almost 450 people come here tonight because, like I said, you care to be here. You want to learn. You want to be part of the solution. That encourages me. So what can you do? I would ask you to comply with the defensible space inspections when we come to your house or when you get the flyer. Just comply with the inspections, and then you've done your part, and we can move on. Take self-initiative. If you don't live in a very high fire severity zone, there's still things that you can do to create defensible space and home hardening. Because that line where the analysts have decided this is the end of the very high fire severity zone, and doesn't mean that fire is not going to cross that line. So you can and might be impacted. So just because we're not telling you to do it, just go ahead and do it anyway. And if you're concerned about how to do it, call us. Call our Fire Prevention Division. One of our specialists will come to your house and we'll spend time with you and give you all the help that you need. The last thing on this part of it I want to talk about is our collaboration. We've been a lot of questions with our adjoining jurisdictions. I've got to tell you, Pebble Beach Community Services District, Cypress Fire Protection District, county area, CAL FIRE, who represents those areas that surround our city, they're absolutely the best partners I think we could ask for. The work that's been done, the collaboration that's been done between our fire prevention specialists and theirs, physically boot on the ground, looking at the areas, because fire doesn't know a jurisdiction line. You know, Monterey doesn't want our fires burning into Pebble Beach, and Pebble Beach doesn't want their fires burning into Monterey. So we collaborate in those areas and try to create defensible spaces, because we all care about the same thing: protect life, property, and the environment. That's why you are here as well. Next slide, please. So now I want to talk a little bit about our response plan and deployment. I want to give you confidence tonight that when you leave, that you feel good that Monterey Fire is wildfire ready. So we have a really strong deployment capacity. Just to make it simple, I'm just saying we're going to hit it fast and we're going to hit it hard. How do we do that? We have 6 strategically located fire stations throughout all the areas that we serve. That gives us excellent response times and a very robust deployment model. Monterey Fire, on an initial dispatch, when you dial 911 on a wildland fire, Monterey Fire is going to dispatch initially an incident commander, duty chief that we have on 24/7, 3 engines, command staff, and then we'll upgrade that alarm based on multiple calls or maybe based on conditions that we see, like smoke showing as we're responding. And we can up that alarm immediately. But another great thing that we have is because we have dual threat zones with all those other communities I was telling you about that CAL FIRE serves. So guess what? When you dial 911 in Monterey for a wildland fire, CAL FIRE is simultaneously launching their resources with us. Additional engines, additional command officers, water tender, but most importantly, aircraft, fixed wing, and helicopter. Hollister Air Attack Base is only 28 miles away from the city of Monterey as an airplane fly. Right? So you can imagine how quickly that is for that air base to get a helicopter and air taker to the Monterey Peninsula. And they will launch immediately on a high fire danger day. Hand crews activate as needed. They have bulldozers, water tenders, all kinds of special equipment. And I know a lot of people fear that word bulldozer. It's not a tool that you would use inside the city or Pacific Grove or Carmel, but there might be an area to stop the forward progression of a fire to save lives and property in the environment that tool could be used. Next slide, please. So the next part of this plan, so we're going to try to get there quickly, right? Get there fast and hit it hard. If we can't extinguish that fire or contain that fire with the resources that we have, then we have to go to the next level. So the next level for us is immediately we're going to open up our Emergency Operations Center if we think that this fire is going to continue on and progress. Our Emergency Operations Center will talk to the County Emergency Operations Center, who will talk to the state, and if need be, the federal. So that's the kind of resource that we have through our EOCs. We have our in-county mutual aid plan that we give mutual aid to our neighboring agencies, and they provide it. I can call for 5, 10 additional engines immediately, more command staff, water tenders, special equipment, and I can get that right now. But the biggest thing that we have is that we're part of the State of California Office of Emergency Services Master Mutual Aid Plan. What that means, activated as needed, obviously, what that means is, you saw that yellow fire engine out there? That belongs to the state of California. It lives in the city of Monterey. It's staffed by Monterey firefighters, and we can use it here. But when they need it, we're there. Like Han said earlier, at the Palisades fire, that OES engine out there arrived about 2 in the morning, and they fought fire for almost 72 hours straight. Not a lot of rest, not a lot of food. It was complete chaos, because that's the way those fires are until the command and control logistics comes behind it. So, but guess what? You know, they had almost 1,200 engines down in the Palisades or in that whole LA basin. We have that same tool to use here. I can immediately, if I really thought I needed 100 fire engines, I could call for 100 fire engines. We're so fortunate to live in the great state of California. We have the best mutual aid plan in the entire world. There's people from other countries and other states in our system that come and study this plan because it's so comprehensive, so robust, and it's been used. All the firefighters are trained the same. We all under the same incident command system, and we all have the same communication systems. That fire engine that's out there today was in the Palisades that night, and guess what? They're in the same frequency, same training, et cetera. So next slide. That will conclude my part. I just wanted to give you a brief understanding and just frame it. At this time, I'll turn it back to Nat, who will introduce the next person.
No, I appreciate it, Chief.
Thank you very much.
Kudos. Round of applause. Yeah, thank you, Chief Miller, and clearly we're fortunate to have you at the helm and our dedicated firefighters, not only to respond to fire statewide, but to be prepared here on the peninsula. So thank you very much. Let's move on and talk to our next topic, which is defensible space that you were discussing around property. And Jen, you're the most knowledgeable on this topic, I think, here on the panel, in this entire room of 500 people practically. So we hear a lot about defensible space, but many folks aren't necessarily sure what that means. What is defensible space, and how does this help reduce wildfire risk?
So defensible space is made up of 3 different zones. There's zone 0, which is the house, and then 5 feet out from your house. And that zone is your ember resistive zone. So really think in that zone that what you're trying to do is get rid of everything that's combustible in that area. So no fuels growing up underneath your eaves, nothing right in front of large windows, limbing back trees that are within 10 feet of your chimney, just really, getting rid of everything in that area that is not fire resistive. Then we have zone 1, which is 5 to 30 feet out from the house, and that's your lean, clean, green zone. And in that zone, you're thinking about nice landscaping, removing all the dead woody materials that you may have in some of that decorative landscaping. We like to call the landscaping in that area lollipop. So you try to do like a little poof of vegetation, thin it out, and then clear around it, and then you'll have another poof of vegetation. And what you're trying to do in that zone is just clean out all the dead material so that you can slow down the spread of a fire on the ground. And then the final zone is a zone 2, and that's 30 to 100 feet out from the house. Obviously, if that goes off your property, you're not going to go that far. You just go up to your property line. And in that zone, that's the reduced fuel zone. And that zone, unfortunately, we have to use some math, but it's based off of slope. If you're on a nice level slope, your factors for vertical and horizontal clearance are based off of that. So, for example, on that flat slope, you would take the height of a bush and you would times that by a factor of 3, and then that gives you what clearance you have to be from that top of that bush to the lowest branch on a tree. And then for horizontal, you would take the height of that bush and you would times that by a factor of 2, and that should be your clearance between the next bush. Obviously, the more steep it is, the greater the distances are going to be required for clearances. So zone 0, we get a lot of questions about that one. It is not quite in effect yet. Yes, the law was passed. However, until the Board of Forestry comes out with our guidelines for exactly what's going to be allowed in that zone, we're in a holding pattern. So once that information comes out, then in the very high hazard severity zones, we'll start with that, using that zone 0. However, it's such a great thing to do no matter what zone you're in, is have that top-notch clearance utilizing zone 0.
Great, thank you, Jen. And this is such a helpful map. We do have it on our website that folks can download as well. We'll be sure to share that with you. Next question is for you as well, Jen. Round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. So what is the fire department's process for defensible space inspections here in Monterey, perhaps in Pacific Grove, Carmel by the Sea, and how does enforcement work?
So as Chief discussed, we have a bunch of part-time defensible space inspectors. We also have all the firefighters on the engines. They're assigned zones, and you can see the ones that are in the red are those very high zones, and those are the zones that we are going to go out and inspect first, and then we work our way down the hazard. But so the defensible space inspectors and the engine companies go out, they do the first inspection. Then you have 30 days to come into compliance, to work on that, and then we come back out again. And then there's 20 days between the second and the third, and then there's 10 days. And then after the 4th inspection, if there's no compliance, you're not working towards things, and we really feel that it's a true fire hazard, then it gets passed to code compliance officers for the appropriate city, and then they would go up to an administrative citation. However, I want to say, as soon as you guys call us or you meet with us or you start working towards these clearances, the timer stops. Our whole point is to educate and to make our communities safer. It's not to throw penalties out there at everyone.
Great. Thanks, Jen. Let's another round of applause for Jen Valdez.
Yay.
So she'll be here for the, we have the second breakout session later this evening. She'll be our key presenter as well. So several questions have come in over the past couple of weeks since we have announced this town hall about the City of Monterey's tree ordinance, and if there's anything that can be done to ease restrictions on removing large trees that could be a fire danger, especially given the increased severity of storms due to climate change. I wanted to make sure to share with all of you, since Tice isn't here tonight, that we have plans this year to review and make updates to the tree ordinance. We're going to have a breakout session again that will have more detailed information where you'll all have the opportunity to hear more from 2 members of our Parks Division staff who are actively working on fuel abatement, tree maintenance, and other efforts to reduce wildfire risk here on the peninsula. And we do have a slide, as you can see here, that shows our current fuel abatement map, at least for the City of Monterey, for those Monterey residents who are in attendance tonight. Members of our urban forestry team also have a table you're welcome to visit until 8:30 p.m. this evening, where they're able to help address any specific questions that you have. And as you can see here, and I know it's maybe a little hard to read, but the work that's being done by the City of Monterey forestry crew is extensive, and it covers all of the very high fire hazard severity zones. Some of these revolve around log removal, hand crew work, fire road clearances, and other work. So we wanted to make sure to share that with you.
Hey, Nat, can I just say something real quick?
Sure.
I just want to say all this great work that you see that's being done. CAL FIRE has been an outstanding partner working with us. They've been working hand in hand, boot on the ground, doing this work, sometimes actually coming in and helping us do work in Monterey. So I just want to make sure that we recognize them and all the great work they've done and the great partners. And I think Chief Nunez is here tonight. You raise your hand, Chief. Thank you very much for all that.
Thank you for that acknowledgement, and thank you very much, Chief Nunez, for your team's support with CAL FIRE. I think, Jen, you're going to be able to help with this next question that some of our homeowners have. Which plants are more fire resistant and suitable for our area? Are these certain plants folks should be more concerned about in terms of fire risk than others?
Well, let me just start by saying I'm not a master gardener, so exact species, we have lists of those for you. But really what you need to look at is plants that have a high moisture content, plants that have broad leaves that are full of moisture. So be thinking like your succulents, things like that, and plants that have a very low resin sap content. But with those things in mind, you can have those plants, and if you're not maintaining them, then it does no good. So if they're dying out and you're letting them grow really big and bushy, then you're defeating the purpose of having these fire-resistant plants. So I would recommend, too, that you guys visit our table if you haven't already out there. We have some QR codes where you can take a look more specifically at different plant species.
And Jen, what steps should residents take if they believe a tree on their property is a fire hazard?
We are very lucky that we have such a great relationship at the fire department and the forestry departments in our cities. So if you have a concern about a tree, you can get a hold of either department and we'll come out and we'll take a look at it. And if it's a determination that the fire department can't make alone, then we're going to call the forestry department and they're going to come take a look with us. But it really is a hand-in-hand process. And a lot of the tree issues can be mitigated simply by doing the ground clearances and limbing up the trees and giving yourself some separation between the crown spacing of your trees.
I just want to mention, too, I know there's been a lot of questions about the 0 to 5 zone. People say, well, do we have to remove trees? Mature trees are not expected to be removed. It's just what Jen said. You just limb them up. Even the state is not requiring that you remove mature trees. That question seems to come up quite a bit.
Thank you. Thanks, Jen. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. I have some questions relating to fire-safe infrastructure and home retrofitting. And I'll start with you, Eric. Again, Eric is the director of the Enhanced Powerline Safety Settings Program over at PG&E. And first question, Eric, is for you is, what measures is PG&E taking to ensure that utility infrastructure near homes is fire safe, and what can residents do if they have concerns about nearby power lines?
Yeah, really appreciate that question, the opportunity to be here tonight. Over the last several years, our history is well known, and we have to do significantly more.
Can you speak into the mic just a little bit better? I think some folks might not be able to hear. Thank you.
I'm sorry about that. That better? Okay. Really appreciate that question. Over the last several years, we've been continuing to move aggressively to make enhancements to our infrastructure to ensure that our equipment is not the cause of significant wildfires. We're making significant progress in that space, but there's certainly more that we need to continue to do. We do this on a regular basis through multiple layers of protection. We have our strengthening efforts looking to install stronger poles using new technology that's available with pole construction, continuing to cover power lines and harden those power lines in some of our highest risk areas, removal of lines that are no longer needed as we're undergrounding, ensuring that those lines are removed so we don't have instances where perhaps they can cause an ignition. Undergrounding is something we've talked a lot about. We've got a goal to underground 10,000 miles. We've achieved 875 miles. By the end of next year, we're looking to underground up to 1,600 miles and continuing that work throughout our high fire risk areas. And on the covered power lines, we've successfully covered over 1,200 miles of power lines, hardened those lines, and by the end of next year looking to be upwards of 1,700 miles. But it's not just the enhancements to our system, it also is about putting controls in place so that we can mitigate the risk. And two of our most effective controls are our public safety power shutoff program, which we began back in 2018. We've seen over the years our ability to be far more precise and targeted with the areas that we de-energize ahead of the most extreme risk. This is those days when we have extreme winds. National Weather Service has issued a red flag warning, extreme conditions where the most effective control is to de-energize those lines before that risk materializes. And so we've continued to use PSPS when that risk is present. And over the last 3 years, we've also established our Enhanced Powerline Safety Settings program, which I have the opportunity to lead that program. This is a program where on those days when wind is not present, but we've got extreme heat, we have significant drops in relative humidity. We may see elevated wind conditions. The fuel moistures in both the dead and live fuels are extremely low and risk is high. We want to ensure that when something happens on our lines, a tree falls into a line, somebody runs into a power pole, a piece of equipment fails, and there's a fault condition, we want to ensure that those lines aren't starting a wildfire. And so our enhanced protection settings allow us to de-energize that targeted section where that fault has occurred within 100 milliseconds. That program alone over the last 3 years, we've seen on average a 70% reduction in the number of ignitions that have occurred when we look historically on these 1,000 lines where we've got this protection. So that's a program that we're continuing to enhance. We're continuing to look to minimize the impact on customers from that so that we've got the fewest number of customers impacted as necessary to provide the protection. But we're very pleased with the ability of those controls coupled with our protections to significantly drop the number of ignitions we've seen. And this is even last year when we saw much more extreme fire conditions, we still saw a significant reduction in overall number of ignitions occurring on the system. In addition to this, we're enhancing our situational awareness. So as we operate these controls, as we establish programs to mitigate risk, we want to make sure that we're targeting those where the risk is the greatest. And so we've got a very one of the leading meteorological programs in the utility industry. Our team of meteorologists have established robust weather models using several decades of weather data and incorporating in computer learning and artificial intelligence. We're able to get much more accurate forecasts today that helps us to understand when both wildfire risk is going to be elevated as well as when we've got significant weather events upon the territory. Part of our meteorological program, we've established 1,500 weather stations across our entire service territory, and this allows us to get very targeted, precise, actual weather information during the course of an event. And then we're real proud of the work we've done with cameras. We've sponsored 600 cameras on the Alert West camera system, which is accessible to the general public, but it's also used by our firefighting agency partners at the local, state, and federal levels. And many of those cameras now are incorporating artificial intelligence, which allows firefighting agencies, in some cases, to detect smoke and be able to respond to a fire before a member of the public has actually seen it and reported it. And then the final thing that we're doing post-fire is continuing to expand our capabilities to protect our assets. We've got our safety infrastructure protection teams. These are former firefighters, many of whom retired from your communities around the state, that work on engines that spray retardant on our equipment. And why that's important is when there's a fire in a community and local fire agencies hit that fire, as the chief said, hit that fast and hit it hard, we want to ensure that as the fire comes through, it's not destroying our poles, so that you can return to your community if you've evacuated much faster. And so been very successful with that. And we've also got 2 Black Hawk helicopters that we've assigned to local fire agencies that are also available through the mutual aid system that the chief spoke about earlier. And recently, our safety infrastructure protection teams deployed to Southern California to support other utilities. And our Black Hawk helicopters were used by CAL FIRE during that firefight as well. So we're looking to address wildfire mitigation on multiple fronts. I think the final question you had was what you can do as individuals. And the best thing you can do is tell us when you see a problem on our system. Broken piece of equipment, a tree branch into a line. We actually have an app that you can download. It's called the Reported app. And that's an app where you can take pictures, you can send that information to us, and our teams will then take that and react to that and make that equipment repair or trim that tree or remove that tree where that risk exists. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Eric, for those examples. Yeah. Give him a round of applause. We're not done with Eric yet. We still have another question for him, and I appreciate your examples that you shared. The fault condition activation that you mentioned earlier, Eric, is something that I personally experienced at home a few times this past summer and the summer prior, where the power was de-energized. But appreciate that you're inspecting those lines to make sure and reduce that wildfire risk. My question for you is, how does PG&E prioritize undergrounding or hardening infrastructure in wildfire-prone areas? PG&E's service area is massive, from the Oregon border all the way down through San Luis Obispo County. So how do you prioritize undergrounding?
Yeah, really large service territory. It's about 3/4 of the state of California. With our wildfire mitigation programs, we're going to target those areas where we can mitigate the most risk. And so we're first looking, California has what's called a high fire threat district map that's been prepared by CAL FIRE and the CPUC. And that map breaks up the state into severe risk, level 3, and moderate risk, level 2. Much of the area we're in here is at that level 2. And so right now, a lot of our programs, our undergrounding and hardening programs, are happening in that level 3 area. We're looking to maximize the amount of fire mitigation we can do in those areas. But as we continue to roll out this program, we'll be expanding it into other communities as well. What I can say is that we're looking, one, at where we can mitigate the most risk, but we also have to look at the geologic conditions. There's some parts of the state, Monterey County, probably not the best example, but some parts of the state where it's just really hard for us to be able to underground lines. Sometimes there's also environmental and cultural sensitivities that we're sensitive to, that we want to make sure that when we are undertaking these programs, we're doing it in close coordination with our local partners and being sensitive to those considerations.
Great. Thank you, Eric. So let's go to Jen, and we're going to ask Inspector Valdez here. When it comes to home retrofitting, perhaps you can weigh in on which building materials are the most effective for retrofitting homes in the very high fire hazard severity zones and the wildland-urban interface.
So we're very lucky in California that the State Fire Marshal's Office has done such a phenomenal job with collecting a lot of these building construction materials and listing them for us. So there is a document that you can access out there. We have a link at our table. You can also Google it online and look up the State Fire Marshal's Office Wildland Urban Interface materials. And the kind of things that they recommend on there are roofing materials, materials, exterior siding materials, window panes. You know, we're looking at dual pane windows, one of which is tempered glass, as it has a higher resistance to heat. Plus, with that trapped air in the middle, it helps dissipate the heat as well. Enclosing eaves, vent screens. So all of those kind of items, decking materials, are all listed on that State Fire Marshal document. I highly recommend that you guys take a look at that. It's not just for the very high severity or just for the wildland urban interface areas. If you've got a remodel or something coming up, it's a great idea to use those materials no matter where you're at, what zone you're in.
Great, thank you, Jen. Okay, let's talk about evacuation zones. I know it's at the top of a lot of folks' minds. How do we prepare? Is the city prepared? Are the cities prepared? So we'll start with Chief Dave Hober in our Monterey Police Department. I know you have some experience working on evacuation plans here on the peninsula. And can you describe the evacuation plans for peninsula residents in cases of wildfires or other emergencies? What needs to be done to keep traffic congestion at a minimum during evacuations?
Thank you, Nat, and good evening to everybody. Like Chief Miller and everybody else on this panel, I very much appreciate that you're all here. I want to cover three aspects, and I think Kelsey will hit on some of these as well. But those three aspects are that we know our evacuation zones. So the county has evacuation zones. They're relegated, and can you go to the next slide? That one right there, you'll see that there's different letters and numbers, and those are done throughout the county. And so it's important to know your evacuation zones. Next, and now if you could go back to the last one, Nat, are the evacuation routes. Now, we all live on the peninsula and understand that those evacuation routes are somewhat limited. And I'll talk specifically about those in a minute. But the third point, I think, is the most important. And that is that when we're dealing with any kind of disaster, natural or man-made, that you need to have a plan. And with FEMA or Red Cross or the county, any of those entities, we have a lot of CERT people in the room. The number one thing is that you have planned, you have a plan. So you need to have a plan to help yourself and your family. You're the most important person to ensure your family along with the rest of the folks in your family. So those main points: know your evacuation zones, know the evacuation routes, and plan to help yourself and your family. So Nat's specific question was about evacuation plans. And there's a document entitled the Monterey County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan. And part of that plan is Annex H, which is specific to the city of Monterey. And that document provides a framework for decision-making related to all hazards, including wildfires. So everything that we're talking about here today, while we're specifically talking about wildfires, this applies to any kind of a disaster that we might have to be dealing with. So the Hazard Mitigation Plan contemplates evacuations for natural or human-made hazards and assesses risks for fire hazards, severity zones, and critical facilities and infrastructure, and we've seen some of those slides. It also provides for emergency management. So when this thing happens, how we're going to manage that from a public safety perspective. And part of that are these emergency evacuation routes that you see in front of you. And what happens is, while those show there, if we have a natural disaster such as a wildfire, or if there was an earthquake, there might be some of those roads that are unpassable. And so we would have to divert you into other ways and communicate that with you, which is another huge part of that. But our main primary areas are in red. The first is Highway 1 northbound. Next is Highway 68 eastbound. Next is Highway 1 southbound to Carmel Valley. And on that map, and this is an example of how we have to adjust, it currently says Highway 1 southbound to Cambria, but we all know that we can't do that right now. But this is how things evolve. But I also want to point out, because I know we've had a lot of questions about what if this street is blocked or that street is blocked or that kind of thing. Those are things that we as a team need to deal with, and Chief Miller's already talked about how we work together as a team to manage through these things, and we would have to determine how we're going to get through those. So we all know these areas, but Lighthouse Avenue, Pacific Street, Del Monte, Fremont, Mark Thomas, Aguajito, we all might think of those. But we've also thought out of the box, and we work with the DLI. So we've worked with them, and I think 2 or 3 years ago, we actually tried the Pine to High gates so that they would open those during an emergency. I know the city manager has talked to the folks up there to ensure that as early as or as late as last week. So we constantly are talking about these. But other areas are 68 East to General Jim Moore and north and east to 101, 218 East on Canyon Del Rey, onto Fort Ord. Into agricultural field areas. So we know if we go up north towards Marina, onto Reservation Road, there's Blanco Road, Cooper and Nashua Roads, 183 and Castroville Road, off 156, Blackie Road, and Malera. And I'll tell you that when contemplating those things, there's a question about, and when we saw the fires in Los Angeles, it's scary to see all of the fires that are occurring there, and we've had questions about where are people going to go if we somewhat get jammed up. But if you think about all of those fields or Fort Ord, there's not a lot of things to burn there. So those are areas that we would contemplate, can we move people there if there's blockage for some reason on the freeways and that kind of thing. So these are all things that we contemplate when we're looking at these issues. Let me turn now to the emergency response. And Chief Miller's kind of already touched on some of this with our Emergency Operations Center. And so we use the standardized emergency management system, the National Incident Management System, and we work through the emergency. And why is that important when I'm talking about evacuations? Because it's not just Dave that's going to figure out where we're going to evacuate. It's a team effort while we're monitoring the fire, we're monitoring the earthquake, and we're adjusting to what's happening. We work with the partner agencies through all kinds of mutual aid agreements that Chief Miller's talked about. County Department of Emergency Management with Kelsey's department. Caltrans to increase capacity at highway ramps, including adaptive signals, traffic cones to accommodate higher volume of evacuating vehicles, providing real-time traffic safety, using the countywide alert and early warning systems to notify the community through phone, text, email, and other means, working with Monterey Salinas Transit to assist in evacuating those that might have limited mobility. And this is really important. The last paragraph of that document relates, and I've touched on this, but in teaching we know we have to say things 3 times for people to hear us. Above all, ensuring that community members are prepared for emergency evacuation events and understand what to do is of critical importance. And I'll tell you, 3, the Red Cross, FEMA, State of California, County DEM, talk about you preparing yourselves to be ready. Monterey County Office Emergency talks about be ready, be set, go now. So we have these little sayings to help you get through these things. Map out, sign up for emergency alerts. So mapping out the routes, sign up for the emergency alerts. And finally, how you address those issues with your plans. So Nat specifically asks what needs to be done to keep traffic congestion at a minimum during evacuations. And again, this comes to your preparation ahead of time, signing up for those alerts, listening to those alerts, knowing your evacuation zones, and watching the news and having all of that information so that you can. What will we do at the police department? We're working to work through these things. We will go and try to do evacuations where we can, and we have done that. But I don't want you to think there's always going to be a police officer that's going to be able to come to your door. We certainly try for that, but that might not happen. And that's why it's so important that you're signed up for those alerts and you're paying attention so that if they tell you it's time to evacuate, that you need to evacuate. And Kelsey will talk more through that.
Great. Thanks, Dave.
Hey, Nat, can I just say one thing?
Yeah, please.
Just from a common sense standpoint, I just want everybody to hear this. If you especially live like in the very high fire severity zone, and it's windy, and it's dry, and you're feeling threatened, and you're smelling smoke, and you're hearing sirens, just go. You don't have to wait for us. Just go. drive like down to the mall, get a cup of coffee, wait, get on Alert Monterey, see if there's anything. It's perfectly okay for you just to leave. You don't even need to ask us. Just go. Please, just feel threatened, go, and then follow up with public safety officials to confirm if it's okay to go back, or maybe you've already beat the evacuation.
That's really good advice, Chief. Thank you for that, and thank you, Chief Hober, as well. Very much. You know, I saw a lot of folks squinting at these maps. We have them online. They're on our website at monterey.gov/emergency. Really easy to remember. Again, monterey.gov/emergency. Really quickly, and maybe we can start like a 1-minute timer on this on the answer to this question. What role does law enforcement play in ensuring the safety of evacuees and protecting evacuated areas from looting? Chief Hober.
Certainly. So there's two aspects to that in how we play for the safety. And obviously, we're going to try to ensure the safe evacuation as we're driving out and those kinds of things. But then there's always a concern about looting. So we have plans in place that, depending on what neighborhood it is, we are going to staff those areas at different intersections so that people cannot go into those areas. And we saw that with the LA fires, where they had different law enforcement making sure that people could not go into neighborhoods. So we have plans for that as well, and have that mapped out for the different neighborhoods and where we would have those checkpoints. I will give this caveat. We're going to be very busy with a lot of issues in our staffing. We don't have a lot of staffing when we're dealing with the other issues, but what we do have is mutual aid with all of the other agencies to help assist with that. So just like in fire, we have mutual aid with police, where we would ask for law enforcement resources from other counties to come and help us as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Chief. Kelsey, I'd love to hear from you on this subject as well. You oversee the Monterey County Department of Emergency Management. Can you give us the county's perspective in terms of evacuation alerting? Chief talked about having a plan, so can you share with us about the various levels and how is that determined?
Yeah, of course. First and foremost, I wanted to thank Andrea Estrada and Sam Young, who are absolutely crushing our preparedness table out front. So if you hadn't had a chance, please go talk to them. There's some really great materials. And I did want to reiterate what Chief Hober and Chief Miller have just said, which is you are help until help arrives most times. And so if you feel at any point in time that your life is threatened, leave. Do not wait for an alert. Do not wait for somebody to come tell you. I look around this room, and every single major disaster that I have worked since the beginning of my career, whether it be the 2017 North Bay fires, the 2020 fires, the 2023 levee breach, the Camp Fire up in Paradise, amongst you are people who are committed to public safety. And so ultimately, what we're asking for you to do is to participate in your own rescue, and greatly appreciate that commitment. When it comes to evacuation alerting, we have a statewide standardized terminology. If you could go to the next slide, please. Yep, there you go. So evacuation warning is the first one, and this is to indicate that there's a potential threat to life and property. You don't necessarily need to leave now, but you need to be prepared to leave. The caveat to that is that if you have a disability or have any access and functional needs, that is your time to leave during the warning, not the order. If you need any amount of time to move, to access resources, leave during the warning. If you have any elderly family members with you, if you have large animals, that is your time to leave. The evacuation order is actually under the penal code issued by the law enforcement agency, and it is indicating that there's an immediate threat to your life and your property, and you need to leave now. We also often issue shelter-in-place orders, and that means go indoors, shut and lock your doors and windows, prepare to remain in the dwelling for a prolonged period of time. And then, of course, we'll issue an evacuation order or shelter-in-place being lifted so that you know it's safe to return home. We do have hard closures, which are a physical barricade like K-rail blocking an area, or a soft closure, which is typically like a sandwich board or somebody manning that entry point. And throughout the reentry process, we do resident-only closures. So if you could go back to maybe the first slide, one more. As previously mentioned, there are pre-identified zones. And this was a 2-year planning effort with every single law and fire agency across the Monterey County operational area, and an equitable commitment to ensuring a timely and planned evacuation for any type of hazard in the county and its municipal subdivisions. The City of Monterey specific zones start with MNT and then the numbers. If you have a moment, you can go to our table in the front, and Sam and Andrea can assist you in finding what your zone is. Next slide. So when we talk about ready, set, go, the evacuation warning is that time to be ready. It's time to pack up your things. It's time to get your go bag together. It's time to start monitoring the situation around you, going online, looking at wildfire cameras, checking emergency alert websites, the City of Monterey and the City of Monterey Fire and PD social media accounts, the websites, Alert Monterey County, and start gaining situational awareness so that you have the information that you need to make an informed decision about your life and safety. The go now is that evacuation order. That is the time to leave. So through be ready, be set, you're gathering your things, you're talking to your neighbors, making sure that they received any emergency alerts, and preparing to leave, and that evacuation order is the time to go.
All right, thank you, Kelsey. Round of applause for Kelsey. You know, I know for me, you know, we've, during the river fire and we had the Carmel fire and then the Dolan fire, right? I was in an evacuation warning zone, but made the personal decision for my family to evacuate. So that's good advice, you know, just because it's a warning doesn't mean you should just wait around necessarily. To make your own personal decision. And those warnings and the timing isn't necessarily, you know, planned where you'll get 2 hours notice before it gets elevated from a warning to a mandatory evacuation. You've got to make that decision yourself. And as we know, these fires can move fairly quickly. So what can residents and those who work in our communities do to ensure they're alerted in the event of an emergency or an evacuation, Kelsey? Yeah, of course. The first 2 quick and free things that you can do that will have an immediate impact on your health and safety is to register for the emergency alert system and to know your zone. You can go on to alertmontereycounty.org and register your residential property, your business address, your school, your grandkids' school, your daughter, your son's office, really any address in the county of Monterey and its municipal subdivisions. You can register on your account. It's an endless number of addresses. I have one for just about every place I frequent. And you can add as many phone numbers and emails. You can choose to receive weather alerts. You can choose to receive just text message, phone calls, emails. The world is your oyster. I like to tell people, if I don't know your phone number, I can't call you to tell you that something important is happening near you. So it's really important for you to share that information with us. It is safe, it is confidential, we do not share it, and we only use it for emergencies. Next slide, I think that's the last slide. I think that's it. That's okay. The last slide, and then the last thing, truly, is to go to the table and have them type in your address to tell you your zone. When evacuation orders are issued, we refer to the zone number. So we'll say an evacuation order has been issued for MNT-0A24, and then we'll link to a map so you can see where you are at in relation to that zone. But it makes it a lot easier for you to understand what's happening if you already know your zone number. So please go and figure out what your number is, either online or on our website, readymontereycounty.org, or at our booth. Great, thank you very much. All right, let's talk about utilities. Round of applause for Kelsey and the county team. We're going to switch gears, talk a little bit about utilities and county fire response coordination, and I will start with you, Evan, from Cal-Am Water. Recently, we had a large water main break here in Monterey. Is it true that the fire hydrants on the hillside emptied due to this incident, and what measures are in place to correct this problem? How does Cal-Am ensure adequate water supply and pressure for firefighting during wildfires?
Sure. Thank you, Nat, and thank you, the City of Monterey, for getting us here together to talk about this, and thank you to all the first responders for working out there every day to keep us safe. So let's talk a little bit about the Monterey water system, and the water that we produce leaves the treatment plant, leaves the wells, and it's moved up to one of 107 storage tanks that serve the Monterey Peninsula. Collectively, those storage tanks hold about 35 million gallons of water. They leave those tanks usually at higher elevations and flow through about 600 miles worth of pipeline that we have here on the Monterey Peninsula. Along the way, there are over 3,340 fire hydrants that are located throughout the system that are there for use in emergencies. And of course, typically we rely on PG&E power to move that water. Water is heavy. A single gallon weighs about 7.5 pounds, so it takes a lot of energy to move water around. When disaster does strike, we also have 55 stationary generators in place in our system with our critical infrastructure so that we can continue to move water and push water through the system. And we also have 5 portable generators on standby that we can move wherever they are needed, in addition to the 55 stationary generators. So I believe the water main in question was the one that broke on El Acero. That was a large main for us, about 16 inches. The water level did drop in the tank that served that area. Our job was to go out, get the system isolated so that the water main leak stopped, and then push as much water as we could back into the tank. We never lost full pressure on that tank, but I would suspect that, yes, we did see some lower water pressure there temporarily. I think when we're talking about wildfire safety generally and what we're doing to protect the community from fire and other natural disasters, what we are looking at are 3 things. What can we do ahead of the fire? What can we do during it? And then how can we help customers and communities recover? We spend a lot of time looking at our system, running models, hydrologic models, to understand where we can get the most bang for our buck by making system improvements, particularly in the distribution system, to upsize pipes to move water more effectively, and of course have that generation that we need during PSPS events and disasters. We also have an engineering team that meets quarterly with all the local fire departments to talk about resilience, to talk about our plans, to make sure that we're coordinated. I was talking to somebody earlier, the last thing you want to do is not know the local first responders when an event happens, because we need to be able to coordinate and make sure we're pushing out as much water as possible to support them in their efforts. When we are aware of a red flag warning or a PSPS event warning, we stop planned system maintenance to ensure that the system is buttoned up and secure. We make sure that all of our storage facilities are filled up, and we make sure that all of our generators are topped off with fuel and ready to go so that if an event does occur, we're ready and able to move that water. And then after an event, we are there with customer protections. We're there to ensure water quality when a system does fully depressurize. When there is a fire event, we have to worry about volatile organic chemicals entering the system, and we have testing protocols in place to make sure that the water is safe for customers. And then we go about rebuilding the system if there's damage to it and helping folks get back and return to their lives.
Great. Thank you, Evan. And how do utilities prioritize repairs to critical infrastructure in the immediate aftermath of a fire?
Sure. Well, as we talked about, unfortunately, California American Water, we serve the Monterey Peninsula, but we serve other areas in California as well. We've had some experience with this, particularly in Sonoma County in the 2017 Tubbs fire. About 500 customers lost their homes and businesses in our service area in Santa Rosa. And very proud of the work we did there. The first thing, obviously, is you have to restore the system, make sure the parts that have been impacted are isolated and shut off, and get the water turned back on for the people that are returning home after the evacuation. They need that water for their cooking and cleaning, and they also need it for the cleanup. Part of that, of course, is ensuring the safety of the water. I think we were among the first water utilities in the state to recognize the danger that VOCs posed after a fire. That kind of testing is now standard throughout the state as you recover a system. And then the third part is rebuilding, and that is where California American Water really shines. We do have resources from around the state, and we're able to bring in assets, both employees and contractors from around the state, additional engineering crews, and additional resources to come in and repair anything that's broken and get the system restored and back working.
Great. Thank you so much, Evan. So we all know that government at the local level, with our cities, with Cal OES, the Office of Emergency Services at the state level, and FEMA at the federal level, we hope, will all have a role to play after the wildfire, right? So the question for all of you, or for Kelsey specifically, is, after a wildfire, what steps does the county take to assess and mitigate damage?
Of course. So it's depending on where the disaster is, we always defer to the local jurisdiction having responsibility. So in the city of Monterey, the city of Pacific Grove, the city of Carmel, of course, it's your local government agencies who take the lead, and we're there to support them. In the unincorporated area, the county takes the lead. But we all do damage assessments the same way. So while there's evacuation orders issued, while immediately mitigating any damages to public infrastructure that might be a threat to your safety, we're also doing damage assessments of private property. So those two things are occurring simultaneously before reentry is allowed. And so they'll shore up roads, they'll shore up bridges, they'll do any active wildfire fighting, or mop up is what they like to call it. I'm not a firefighter, I apologize. And then also you have utilities coming through to do damage assessments and also to secure their infrastructure. If there's downed lines, any hazardous trees that need to be removed so that they don't fall on the right of way or on any structures. And then reentry is a collective process that is approved through a somewhat of a democratic vote amongst the public safety agencies. Once that's done, our next big task is mitigating threats to post-fire debris flows, which you're seeing a lot of in LA County right now. And so one of the things that we'll do, in addition to damage assessments, is identify specific residential properties as well as public infrastructure that are at risk for post-fire debris flows. And we do that through CAL FIRE's WERT team, a watershed emergency response team. And they'll produce an actual document with the addresses of which areas need to be mitigated. For properties, for private residential properties, we typically apply for what's called an Emergency Watershed Protection Program through NRCS. And that is a federally funded program where they provide a recommendation to the property owner on physical barriers or structures that can be installed around the property. And 75% of that cost is paid for by the federal government and typically sponsored by the local agency, so the money's not coming directly out of your pocket. And that I've truly seen lives saved by K-Rail post-fire. And so that structure will be in place for 2 to 3 years because post-fire debris flows can occur for 3 to 5 years post-fire. And so we really look at the next disaster post-wildfire. And I think the rule of thumb is if you can see a burned slope behind your house, you're typically at risk for debris flow. So we look immediately to the next threat or hazard.
Great. Thank you, Kelsey. All right, our last and final topic before we get to Q&A is insurance and risk mitigation. So we've got an expert here, Richie Sayavong from the California Department of Insurance. Maybe you can help us with the next couple of questions. Some residents can't secure fire insurance on the commercial market. So what is the California Department of Insurance doing, including any financial assistance programs to support residents who are having a hard time?
Yes, thank you again, Nate, for having me here this evening. So in 2023, in September 2023, Governor Newsom issued an executive order to Commissioner Lara to instruct him to modernize and figure out this insurance crisis we're having in the state. So to give a little bit of context into it, you know, in the past 10 years, we've been seeing very devastating wildfires across the state, but we're also seeing natural disasters around the world, climate change being a big impact of it all. But California's regulations are far behind from what's going on to keep up with those trends. So Commissioner Lara and the department has created a comprehensive plan to modernize the insurance market. So some of the executive actions and reforms that we are taking is we are increasing availability of insurance in wildfire distressed areas. We've streamlined and improved our rate approval process. We have introduced new risk management tools in rate making, which are catastrophe modeling and reinsurance costs. So insurance companies have been committing to writing more policies in wildfire distressed areas, which they are not legally required to today. So this will help depopulate and strengthen and modernize the FAIR Plan and close this insurance gap that we're experiencing. So what we're introducing is catastrophe modeling. So catastrophe modeling is prioritizing wildfire safety, mitigation, and transparency. As many of the other panelists have discussed, mitigation and safety is truly important. And when you look at insurance, insurance is written based on risk. If you can reduce the risk, the more availability options that you will have. So looking only to the past does not only recognize the massive investments in wildfire safety being made by our state and local governments, public and private utilities, and of course our homeowners. So our regulation has 4 important benefits to consumers. The first benefit is reliable rates. Insurance consumers will see sustainable costs that more sustainable costs than under current regulations. The second is greater availability of insurance. Insurance companies will increase their writing because they can better anticipate future losses, rather than non-renewing higher risk policyholders or even pausing writing altogether. The third benefit of this all is safer communities. Catastrophe modelings can capture the benefit of wildfire mitigation and encouraging and rewarding those efforts. The final benefit is stronger oversight by the Department of Insurance. Models are currently being used by insurance companies outside of rate making and across the nation. The department will have access to these catastrophe models, so California leads and continues to lead in consumer protection. And to provide a little bit more light onto this, we've already received written confirmation from Allstate that if and when these regulations have been put in place, they will start writing policies here in California. As many of you know, Allstate is one of California's largest insurance companies, and this is good news. Farmers, which is the second largest homeowners and commercial writer in the state, has reopened its condo and apartment coverage. And Mercury has also began writing policies in Paradise. So we followed the template, which is the Safer from Wildfires regulation, which is similar to what Jen was talking about, your Zone 0, Zone 1. Those regulations, those improvements that you have on your property will better give you discounts on your insurance, but also provides transparency about how your wildfire risk score is put into place, what factors went into it, and if you disagree with it at any circumstance, you call the Department of Insurance because we're here to assist with you on that. So another important element of stabilizing our marketplace in the face of climate change, we're allowing California-only reinsurance costs. So Californians, we don't have to pay for the hurricanes, the floods, anything across the nation. We are focusing on just California alone. This is something that hasn't been done before. So understand that when you're paying your premiums, you're not paying for what's going across the tundras melting in Alaska or the tornadoes down in the Midwest. But we want to underscore that. And under this agreement, insurance companies that want to use these new risk assessment tools, they must agree to increase and maintain writing in wildfire distressed areas of our state before we allow them to incorporate California-only reinsurance costs in their rate making.
Thanks, Richie. Now, a couple years ago, I was unable to renew my fire insurance, so I had to go to the California FAIR Plan. Can you tell us a little bit more about the California FAIR Plan, and is it even a sustainable program here in the state?
Yes, certainly. So the FAIR Plan, or the not-so-fair plan, the unfair plan that many other folks have called it, It's merely a pool of insurance companies that operate in the state of California. So the FAIR plan came to be back in the 60s when the Watts riots happened and all the insurance companies pulled out of Watts, having the state to step in and to create the Fair Access to Insurance Requirement, FAIR plan. So it is run and operated by all these insurers in California. So if any insurer is writing homeowners policies, commercial policies, they are part of the FAIR plan. So do understand that we do regulate them and we are working with them. And the big question is, are they financially stable? They are. So because it's owned by the insurers and ran by the insurers, they participate in the profits, losses, and expenses in the plan and the direct proportion to its market share business written in the state. So people have asked, when an insurer pulls out of California or greatly reduces its market share, based on assessments, it's based on their market share 2 years earlier. This is according to Victoria Roach from our assembly. But the FAIR plan is solvent. I do want you to understand that. But we are also improving the FAIR plan, as I mentioned. The FAIR plan coverages currently are going to be rising to $20 million per building, and pretty soon $100 million per location max. We're anticipating that to pass by July 1st of this year. But we do want to undermine and remind folks that though you might have a FAIR plan policy, still continue to shop in the voluntary market. If you find a policy there, you will get reimbursed for your unused portion of your FAIR plan policy, and that is available on our department website as well.
Great. Thanks so much, Richie. All right. Let's give him a round of applause. We've got 10 more minutes left in the program. We're going to extend it by maybe 5 minutes. We're going to ask our senior admin analyst, thank you, Cheryl Cordes, and then thank you, Assistant Chief Pat Moore as well, who went through, we received dozens of index cards. We're only able to ask a few questions. We're going to ask the first question. So heads up, this one's for Police Chief Dave Hober. I'm worried about homeless encampments inadvertently starting fires. I feel we need to address this possibility and how to keep these fires from igniting in the first place. 1 minute response, please.
Thank you, Nat. You always tell me 1 minute, that like I talk too much.
Just for you, Chief.
So I absolutely agree. I think that's a concern for all of us that live here. And we have at the Monterey Police Department, the Community Action Team, and we are constantly going out, looking in the different areas to ensure that encampments are not building up or that there are not issues where people are illegally camping. And we're working through that process. Sometimes that's harder than other times, but I think that there was a recent decision out of the Supreme Court about 8 months ago now that assists us a little bit with that. And we're actually going to bring a new camping ordinance before council, I think in the next council meeting, so that we can more readily address that. But really, it's our community action team officers that are out there making contact with these folks, seeing if they need services, and telling them that they can't be there and that they need to move their things. And what happens is, and they move to other areas. So it's a constant kind of us moving and paying attention. But I think we do a really good job. Those officers that work the community action team have a heart for helping people, and they really do a good job at not only helping them, but having them move out of those areas so that we are mitigating the danger that might happen with fire if they're in those wooded areas.
Thank you, Police Chief Hober, for your concise and precise answer. All right. We're gonna next question is for Evan. Who maintains the fire hydrants and how often are they tested?
Sure. California American Water is responsible for maintaining fire hydrants. We currently inspect all fire hydrants, all 3,300 and some of them, every 5 years. We are actually going to be requesting to move to an every year inspection process going forward. We will need additional staff in order to do that, but given the modern era of disaster preparedness and resiliency, we think it's the right investment to make.
Yeah, great, thank you. Appreciate that. All right, next one is for Eric, PG&E. The power poles on Del Monte Avenue between the Naval Postgraduate School and the eucalyptus forest are being replaced. Why not bury the lines? Question mark, question mark.
Appreciate that question. I don't have a specific answer. It may have to do with where it is relative to our wildfire maps that I referenced earlier. And if it's an area that's not in significant wildfire risk, that could be one consideration. But I'm certainly happy to take that question, get a more detailed response. And if you're the individual that asked the question, feel free to approach me when we're done here so I can get your information and get you a specific reason why we didn't underground in that particular area.
Great, thank you. Yep. All right, Richie. So what is the projected business model for insurance looking out into the future, say 10, 20 years? Is the current going to be viable, and what changes do you see coming? If you could share that briefly.
Yes, so Commissioner Lara has been expecting insurers to return back to the state in California by this summer. And as we get more insurers and approvals on their rate makings incorporating these new tools, we are hoping to see more competitive business within the next few years. So we are currently, in short, we are working on the availability of insurance, and then we're going to work on the affordability of insurance.
Okay, thank you. Next question's for Jen Valdez. So I've got a tree about 20 feet from my deck. What should I do? Should every tree or shrub within a certain distance need to be cleared?
No, we kind of covered this a little bit earlier with if you properly clear the ground vegetation and you limb up the trees, what you're going to do is prevent the ground fire from transitioning and laddering up into the crowns of the trees. But we always recommend that you thin out those crowns as well, and then you should be looking at your deck. What materials is your deck made of, and can you harden that to make it more resistant to wildfire as well?
Great, thank you, Jen. All right, next question is for Kelsey. Oh. Yeah. So I know MST, Monterey Salinas Transit's out at the vendor booths today, but so you'll try to answer on MST's behalf, perhaps, or I know you're based on your experience in county emergency management. In terms of our own citizen planning, what type of assistance by public transit or alternative means of evacuation can we count on if we must get out of the immediate area due to fire or earthquake? And how do you get to a designated shelter if we don't have a vehicle?
Of course. So in the unincorporated area, we actually have a MOU with the Monterey Salinas Transit for use of their resources in an emergency, and we often set up evacuation pickup points and drop-off points with them. We did this in the community of Pajaro. We did this in Carmel Valley, actually, and so they'll identify frequent stops along the evacuation route, as well as the shelters and any recovery centers. In the city of Monterey, I presume it's the Jazz bus situation that you have. I can't speak to the municipal service, but the local bus service essentially will work directly with fire and law to identify evacuation pickup points and drop-off points.
Yep. We definitely do have a collaborative relationship with MST. All right, well, those are the Q&A questions. Again, let's give a round of applause to our panelists for their engagement tonight.
Good job.
Really appreciate all of their time. And thank you all to all of you as well for submitting your thoughtful questions and your engagement here tonight. A few more announcements before you leave. So, if you have additional questions or you need resources, please visit monterey.gov/wildfire-ready, or reach out to the City of Monterey or your respective municipality or our panelists' organizations. As a reminder, we have 2 breakout sessions after this. One is going to be for the first 20 minutes. You can join our Parks Division team for more information about tree regulations. They've got more slides, more information. And then after that, from 8:05 to about 8:25, we'll have Jen Valdez. You'll hear more from Jen about defensible space inspections and home hardening as well. And don't forget, vendors and informational booths are here until 8:30 p.m. Next, I'd like to pass it on to our city manager, Hans Uslar, for final and closing remarks. Thank you.
So thank you everyone for staying so long. So what do you think? Are you wildfire ready? Are we wildfire ready? You learned a lot of messages here, but one of the key messages that I take away is it's not a finite process. It's a process that is perpetual. We have to be ready over and over and over again. And I spoke to the chief from CAL FIRE a second ago, and I said, this will all continue until we are dead. And he said, it will continue even after us. That's one of the messages you have to take away. What I encourage you to do is think about what you can do. Think about joining maybe CERT, Community Emergency Response Teams. And think about and thank your firefighters as well and your public safety folks, because when we all run away and stand in the fields or stand in the parking lot at Fort Ord, those guys are marching in to protect what they want to be protected and to save people's lives. So my last appeal is hug a firefighter when you go out, and enjoy also the 2 other sessions that we have. I'm utmost grateful for you guys here, sitting here, providing excellent information. Again, this is a process that will continue, and we will continue to speak to you, and we hope we can count on you to help us when we need your help, and you can count on us to help you when you need our help. So thank you so much.